Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. Let's just zoom in and focus in on some replies to a ton of emails that I have been receiving with questions after some of the last videos. How do you kind of release the doldrums, that heavy energy, that feeling of what people are now discovering that could be, part of kind of like a complex PTSD reaction, a reactivity state. How do I let go of that? This is a great viewer question, and the one that we're really going to zoom in and focus in on, because this seems to be, after the video series, a lot of people are wondering, how do you kind of come through it and not feel so weak, meek, feeling kind of apathetic, or that you can't handle the task at hand. In other words, it's hard to get away and pull away and put attention on yourself rather than being distracted by the narcissist, by the drama, by the negative banter about, there's going to be another blizzard, an emotional blizzard coming your way, watch your phone. It's like a storm that settles in your environment, that you're always sort of on guard, on your toes, ready to put up your dukes, or just it's an uncomfortable communication, and there's something energetically that is off balance and not right. So you don't feel that you can be happy, perky, bubbly yourself without this like weight on your shoulders. Some people in psychology will call it the monkey brain, the one that is the chattering one, the back and forth, the analyzing prefrontal cortex, which is just on high alert, and it's kind of mixed up in that fight or flight mechanism, and it's not really just coming into a state of being. Sounds so simple, so airy-fairy. What are you talking about? This doldrum reaction is kind of like after, it's kind of the feeling of your neuromuscular system, your central nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system are really just trying to calm down. After being agitated, it's like, it's an aggravated neural connectivity within your entire being that now needs to kind of be smoothed out, cleaned out, and getting off of the distraction. Oftentimes, narcissists and toxic relationships that are wrought with this bantering, this monkey mind, this back and forth, that's either living in the past, arguing over something in the past, or in fear of the future, or trying to guard off the future. There's never this sort of being and enjoying. So if you are kind of in the doldrums, or it's really, it's in a state of exhaustion. I mean, just like people who, you hear about Lady Gaga, like passing out on stage. I mean, when she's singing, she's in that monkey mind, going back and forth, the bad romance, kind of looking back and then still stewing in it. And, and then there's this cry for, desire for more, and longing. And so, a lot of that back and forth, that monkey mind can create a real sort of, you might feel like an exhale, but you can't really exhale, or that, you're just still kind of stuck in that distraction. And it's just, I think it's to be helpful to kind of break through and begin to kind of crack through that sort of, heaviness, or like a cement, emotional cement, a lot of people have described it as, where you're not really sort of, you kind of can't feel within your body. And we talk so much about this, and we really get down to the nitty gritty, because, the devil is in the details, is a saying in a quotation, and it's carried on for, many generations, at least probably since the early 1900s, where, in the details, to really get it cleaned, to clear out what I would call your energetic field, or really kind of your perception. And it's that sort of ego that is bruised, that ego that is wounded. We're going to call that part of the self, part of the being, part of the mental faculty, as that. That state, of being sort of anticlimactic. Getting out of and emerging from that can really, need to take little baby steps to kind of get yourself liberated and focus. Part of the issue with toxic relationships is that of distraction, of constantly, part of denial can almost mimic, in my feeling, sort of an ADD, just sort of constantly, because you can't focus on the commitment, you're in that sort of monkey mind, drama like the Lady Gaga we're talking about. And that back and forth, that takes a lot of electrical energy. It takes a lot of what, people in my family might call mental energy. So you have to be careful that can be very taxing, i.e. after your emotional day, zoom, write the tax. What kind of tax are you paying? How are you taxing yourself? And so it's to give up. That is really the bruised ego that is so weighty, so heavy. And the ego is kind of like, it's a very grounded energy. Sigmund Freud, I think he's really the forefather who kind of talked about the superego, the ego, and the id. And it really parallels and mimics the different areas of the brain. The id is like that impulsive, sort of fight or flight, limbic brain, childlike, is very curious and high energy and is out of control. So you call that the id, part of you that's very, I don't want to even say animated, but not disciplined. That is the id, and that's like what develops in your childhood. And then there's the ego, which is the mediator between, that's the limbic brain, and then getting into the prefrontal cortex operating, where you're more sort of analyzing things, talking about things. This is that, it's the ego is the middle ground. It's kind of what people put out there. You've always heard about that. They've got a puffed up ego, or they have an arrogant ego, or they have low self-esteem. They're very down. They look very down. They look very, sort of just hurt. There's a wounded ego. There's a word for that state that's going to come to me here in a moment. And then there's the super ego, which is really kind of like the mature, when things have been really worked through and you're at that new stage of development. But when you're in between in that ego, the ego gets wounded oftentimes in relationships, in fights and spats with a toxic individual, someone who is vying for the bigger ego, even if it's by a few grains, a few sands. And so, it is that staying in that ego where you're trying to always put a form, a name to what this person is doing. You're in that analysis paralysis. That is the doldrum. And it's truly, in my feeling, it's being distracted from really being congruent and with what you want and who you are. From that id worked out through the ego, and then the superego, and then the release of that ego. In other words, not needing to live in that egoic realm, meaning that matrix, that same pattern. It's letting that whole pattern dissolve and into thin air. It's to visualize that, we as we've talked about before, when we talk about how the brain itself functions, the subconscious really relies on images. You must understand that the subconscious will go and do what you instruct it via an image. So an image, you might have noticed this if you look back in your childhood and you remember that cool toy or that cool tool or that cool piece of art or piece of jewelry. And even though you were a child, you had that curiosity. That's your id. That's like your true, that's closest to your true essence, is really getting into that id area, being as a child, being, like a 3-year-old, drawing on the floor with crayons or playing hopscotch. That's the id where it's just carefree, high-spirited, not worried. So that's that essence before it meets the ego of forms. So when we talk about children, they're oftentimes nonverbal, and they're also in that very young developing brain where they can, you know, even though they're two or, you know, one, and you say, you know, find your shoe, and they can't talk to you, but they can hear you. They have that, you know, image memory, you know, visual memory, or I forgot what it's called, the visual language. It'll come to me. That'll come to me in a moment. But it's getting out of that, you know, getting back into that id, and then releasing all the ego of the form. That's what you know, the ego loves form. So as we're talking about the subconscious, it's going for an image, like a little child, you know, let's say there's, you know, peanuts, and they're putting it in one of those peanut grinders, just as a kid playing with their little toys that chop up things or whatever. And the child is carefree and just operating out of curiosity. That is really where, you know, there's that satisfaction. There's that gratification. You know, and things are not labeled. They just are, and they're just enjoyed. There's a purity. So, you know, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, how do I break free then? It's to then remember times in your childhood where you were in that id state, where it was a little bit undisciplined, out of control, but it was good. It was positive. You were playing. You were digging a hole in the ground. You were making a sandcastle. You were playing jump rope. You were playing ball. You were, you know, doing, you know, whatever. That was your pastime at that young age. So, you know, Freud calls that the id. And it's like the childish place, but that actually is a good place for healing. And that's a good place to start when you go on your recovery date, is bringing out that id that is playful, curious, open to everything and anything, isn't labeling anything, isn't saying I'm bad, I'm good. It's not judging, it's just doing. You know, the kid says, hey, it's summertime, I'm going to, you know, throw on my shorts and I'm going to have a popsicle. I mean, it's not labeling, well, is that stupid? Is that childish? Is that going to be upset? You know, you're not analyzing. So that is the id. That's the aspect of that energetic experience within the brain itself. So it's kind of important to understand how things operate. And so then, you know, in that childlike essence, you know, you might have been going through school, you liked that book, you liked that class, you didn't like this one, you were into the playground here, you know, so that's like the natural flow. It's really important to retrieve those images and experiences of yourself and revisit them. You know, this is taking time to do the inner work, you know, and the narcissist is always about the outside world, you know, the forms. It's, I've got the Gucci, I have a Gucci belt, but, you know, I don't have it as an egoic thing. It's just something that came into, you know, my possessions, you know, whatever cost it is, you know, it was given to me. But these things, though, in that childlike essence is really where you need to revisit within yourself and retrieve those, and then hold on to those and really focus on that and see if you can then kind of rekindle that, because the child then works by images. And if you think about, there was that one hammer that I wanted, I really admired that car, I really wanted to work like that. You know, there's this creativity, natural desire, you know, that's working and flowing before the sensor of all the, you know, emblazoned back and forth is going on. So that's where the labeling, that is the egoic mind. That's where it takes a lot of that big, dense energy and then weighs down on you. It's an energetic experience. It's a mindset. It's an aspect of living. It's kind of a choice where you remain to stay at that level, what we would call at that level, you know. But, you know, growth, personal growth, spiritual growth, in growth in relationships is usually about taking it to the next level. Let's take it to the next level, you know, meaning like, let's let go of some of that egoic mind and let's kind of process flowing upward and out from that ego, you know, from that id, ego to super ego, and then just sort of, and then getting into the other dimensions, you know, the intuition, the innovation, the, you know, the free form of lifestyle, the spontaneity of things is then experienced and is what you do. It's who you be. You don't analyze. So you're okay. You're not saying, oh, is that to this? Is this to that? You're not encumbered by that that egoic mind, which is the one that creates that matrix of division around you. So if you understand that it's kind of like, if you were to look at, a circle, and then, you see the, patterns of, planets and things like that. It's kind of like that, in my mind, that, that ego, keeps kind of this thick wall or heaviness around you. It's where you're living, within yourself. If you say that's very becoming of somebody, it usually means, they've taken it to that next level. They're not stuck in that sort of distracted egoic mind. So they're not self-conscious. So, when you see, for myself, I love dance, ballet, I'm, the Grace Kelly dancing, or, whoever that was, back in the day, the waltzing. It's just amazing to watch and beautiful. Now we've got like Dancing with the Stars and everything of that nature. But, those flow states are very important because you can see, they're not self-conscious. They've learned and disciplined, so they've learned through that egoic mind to let go of too many forms so that they can then flow without, censoring themselves. If that makes any sense, it's very important, because then once you let go of these labels, and this is very kind of deep, psychology. So a lot of you might not be able to handle this. This might be like a lot of information, but I think once you really get it, you'll understand something really, a real true precious gem to understand how your brain works. Once again, this isn't always taught in school. You didn't take neuroscience, quantum physics or whatever, maybe you have. But anyway, the mind itself picks up on images. Your mind picks up on ideals, how your relationship is going to be, whether you acknowledge this or not, whether, you remember, how they were holding, you saw an image of a couple, or you saw somebody who you, were attached to, those are the drivers, of, what then you focus on, and that subconscious has an image and then is always trying to create and satisfy that image. So, it's important to understand then that you have these good images, that are guiding you, but you also have perhaps some dysfunctional images, or sort of not clear images for yourself. In other words, they're clouded over. You've been fed a lot of, malarkey. You've wasted a lot of time. You've wasted energy. You've been on, So that's in the egoic realm. So again, if you think of it like a concentric circle, in the middle is the id, but then there's the ego that kind of is it like a dense energy. And then the superego is usually more sophisticated, in line, congruent, and has that flow, that grace, you might call that. However, it is important that you kind of understand and identify those positive images for yourself and those driving factors, as well as understand the influences that have hurt, and then to let them go, and to not live then in that label of, that happened, it's because if you're in that mind frame, you're always trying to put a label and a form to it. You're creating that egoic matrix, just like a mold that's just trying to form and kind of root itself in that, and it creates kind of like a web of thought, or what we would call, a habit of thought, or an obsession, or people who ruminate. It's really, it's putting the pedal to the metal on those negative images, is what's happening. So it's like you have to bust the chain of that bike that you've been peddling, that image in front of you. In other words, you have to understand, and then those other ones, to let them go, and then keep with you the positive. In other words, take the lessons learned, take the positive moments, with gratitude, take the pain with gratitude as well, because those are where your greatest lessons are, and that's then where you're developing your super ego, like Freud would talk. If There's a great book if you're into psychology. Well, probably you're not, but, you know, Freud, A Primer of Psychology is, you know, a book that he wrote, probably about 100 years ago in the early 1900s. But it's a primer, Freud Primer of Psychology. Pretty in-depth. I mean, you probably, you know, you might need like some glasses to read it. I have this magnifying glass if I'm trying to like read something or look at something up close. Because I really like to see the detail or really understand it. And then so we're really kind of zooming in and understanding how and why that density is around you, and to then stop loading up that sort of energetic field or aura around you. In other words, pull out the splinters, pull out the roots from that are entangling and sort of suffocating, you know, your id, your positivity, the one that can kind of be like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then you find yourself doing things that you've been putting off. The procrastination is caused from the distraction caused by these relationships. I feel once again that oftentimes these relationships, they're so distracting from your id and like it being satisfied that it can become an obsessive and try to, you know, process it and then cleanse it out or, you know, resolve it, settle it. It's really important, I think, to understand that if that is, you know, of any assistance or help, because, you know, the ego so wants to resolve things and fight it out. But once you let that go, things stop being a fight. You know, when people are agitated and they come to you and then all of a sudden they're at ease, you know, they feel like there's no tension in this person, you know, and then you know, it's because you've let that go and you're not living in that judgment sensor field of mindset or etheric energy that is generated when you're living in that ego. Once again, you have to live on a tamed ego. You know, with a lot of my studies, it's all about training, you know, and, you know, refining and, you know, understanding, you know, behavior and things of that nature, and how, you know, not to be impulsive, you know, especially if you're training to be in education. You know, you have to be, as, you know, a steward, you know, of teaching. You have to be, you know, a person of integrity and character. And so, you know, that comes with desire to be that. So part of the breakthrough process is also to have the desire to, you know, say, and the courage to say, I'm going to let go of all of that. Meaning, I'm out. I'm pulling out all the strands. You know, some people pull their hair out. It's kind of like you have to pull that emotional hair out from what's, you know, choking up that area. And it's an awareness. It's talking about it. It's thinking about it. It's flushing it out. It's the same thing like working on a piece of wood. You know, you're going to get those grains going nice and smooth so that there's, you know, a softness to the wood or a sheen or something of that nature where you can, you know, feel the grain. The same thing is like the fibers of your being. It's the same way. It needs to be kind of sanded down, brushed off, you know, blow off the dust and get it so it's in the shape that is supportive to you. You know, that's like what your subconscious mind is in your physiology. So it's just saying, okay, you know, I'm doing that work and I get it now. And, you know, the mouth stops, you know, and the ears will listen. You know, the eyes will observe, the ears will listen, but the mouth will be quiet, and it'll just allow a be state. So it's pulling back and refraining. But another thing that is to lift that density is there has to be a real rock bottom experience. I think when coming through toxic relationships, things need to hit a rock bottom. Just like with an alcoholic, you know, maybe they drink vodkas or whatever it is that they do, you know, and their lifestyle is dysfunctional. They can't hold a job. You know, it's that same thing. that needs to be eliminated. And so once again, that tension, if it's not become like a rock bottom moment, just like an alcoholic, they can have a few blackouts, a few blunders, but if they haven't hit a rock bottom where they themselves go, you know what, man, I ended up in the emergency room with DT tremors or whatever it is that sends them in, you know, and they go, whoa, like I'm, you know, 5'10", 96 pounds, you know, this, you know, I'm changing, send me to AA. So that's like a rock bottom. So if you're still in that doldrum, it's like there, you haven't hit a rock bottom. They're softening the blow. There's a soft landing every time. So there really needs to be kind of like a rock bottom moment. And until you really hit that and say, I want to change this for myself, and I am doing it, and I'm going it alone, you know, what's that song? Here I go again on my own, you know, walking down the only road I've ever known, you know, but at least he knows it. You know, he knows in that song, you know, that's just the lyrics, but you have to sometimes be a pioneer, and it's a pioneer to your excitement and your adventure and your change and your realization and processing thing from a higher energetic level that's lighter in being and has flow and grace and is okay with boundaries and standards. In other words, okay, I can stop here. You know, I'm being easy on myself here. I'm giving myself momentum to just be, and I'm not engaging, once again, is how I'm being and what I'm not doing. So, you know, really examine, you know, some of these topics that we've discussed today, see how they apply to your certain state. And I truly hope that this video and this discussion helps. I hope it's been a great day for you. And so thank you so much for your viewership and your comments and your inquiries and sharing and interacting here in the channel. I do review your comments. I can't write for everybody's. I mean, I get tens and thousands of you know, comments, and it was just too much to engage in that. So I hope to, you know, as I read and then discuss with your inquiries and you're sharing your things, hopefully one person's question will help the whole community. I mean, so that's why it's great when you share. It's great when you participate. It's great when, you know, you have that open forum and you feel okay and safe, you know, and just at least listening and then finding some privacy in this video in order to work through these things and be like, yep, I got it. You know, I'm dusting this off. I'm not getting stuck in the ego. I'm not getting stuck too childish either. And I'm certainly not going to be, you know, just stuck in my analysis. I'm going to allow it to flow, and I'm not going to allow it to get stuck in those little areas that tend to snag me up emotionally. I'm going to be careful, and if it does, I'm not going to pull hard and ruin things. I'm going to be gentle. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to reduce that energy reaction into more of a happy, lighter, inspired, you know, open-minded perspective, which really does occur when you accept and embrace change as what is real. And knowing that there's stability and connection running through all of it, you just have to have time to acknowledge it. And you can really only do that once you stop being distracted by the chaos, the drama that's taking you off your life path. It really is like a distraction. So, you know, that's why it's always hard. There's an anticlimactic after this. So if you can, once again, you know, withhold energy from what does not serve you. In other words, stop. You know, like the Bob Hope show, you know, they'd be like, I've got a problem with drinking. What do I do, Bob? And he's like, stop. I've got a problem with relationships and I'm fighting. What should I do? Stop. I mean, it's like a really funny, I think it's like back in the day, Bob Newhart, when there was only 3 channels on the TV. It was a great, you know, comedian series, and he was like a psychologist who lived, you know, on the shores of Lake Michigan. Really funny show. If you're not of, you know, that generation, you might not have remembered it as a child, as the time when I remember watching that. But I hope that this forum helps. And it's kind of like, it'll begin to all sort of gel and make sense when you open up and accept it. So it's kind of like I receive this connection, and it just is. It's just something that you can't really explain. It's something that has to be experienced. It's something that you kind of, it's an emotional release or catharsis. You might need to go through some yelling to get to your rock bottom, but when you hit that rock bottom, you'll say, you know what, it's up from here, and then you get up. Your emotions are up, more spirited, once you have these lessons learned and realize how you need to stop those thoughts that are labeling all those experiences and justifying and judging. So once you let go of that pattern and you just get into that mindfulness state, I've never done this before. I've never just allowed myself to be and exist, or to meditate, or listen to, a guided chakra meditation. I've never done this. Well, it's time to train yourself and cultivate self-esteem by doing this. These are the tools. This is the course. This is the lesson. This is what it is, So call it simple, call it hard, call it new. I don't know if it's going to work, question the skepticism, I don't know. Well, you don't know until you do it and until you keep going. It's something that has to be practiced daily. Anyone who has been a success has been able to practice daily. It's what I would call the frequency, which is really part of, the tools when they really begin to glide. It's the repetition and experience. It's the frequency with which you say, you know what, I'm going to apply those tools. I'm going to do a mindfulness meditation for 15 minutes or 8 minutes. I'm going to do, a mindfulness meditation for 8 minutes in the morning, and I might do that 5 times a week. And I'm going to find a meditation that works for me, that plays here on YouTube, whether it's for spirit guides or your higher self or your guardian angels, or praying on the divinity, connecting with source and connecting with divinity for that moment. And then stop all the whatever it is. But come to that space, because you're retraining your body through muscle memory to feel okay. So it's like you're learning a body skill. You're learning a mindset skill. You're getting into the delta wave, not the delta wave pattern, but like the beta wave pattern of your brain, where it's slowing down a little bit. It's more receptive. It's not so in the ego, like I have to do this, I gotta tell him that. It's refraining from that. It's like the you can't have music without silence behind it. They always talk about that when you talk about art. It's sometimes the pause that makes the music. It's the pause that makes the music.